The crystalline chamber floated in the darkness of space, massive and ancient. Inside, representatives from 47 different alien species waited in silence. Their eyes, some with 3 pupils and others with compound lenses, all focused on the human standing alone in the center of the testing floor. Dae-jung adjusted his gray jumpsuit and tried not to think about the millions watching through holographic feeds across the galaxy. He was just a maintenance engineer from Seoul Orbital Station. 3 weeks ago, his biggest concern was fixing a faulty air recycler. Now he stood before the Galactic Conclave, about to take the trial of cognitive ascension. Behind the observation glass, Hana pressed her hand against the transparent surface. She had recommended Dae-jung for this assignment. If he failed, it would reflect badly on Earth's entire application for Conclave membership. But she believed in him. She had watched him solve problems that stumped engineers with twice his experience. "The trial will now commence," announced Velmara, the Conclave arbiter. Her insectoid body gleamed under the chamber lights, and her translator device converted her clicking mandibles into standard galactic speech. "Human-designated Dae-jung, you have 12 hours to complete the challenge. 186 species have attempted this trial over 3,000 years. Only 23 have succeeded." Ambassador Tae-min, Earth's representative, stood near the back of the observation deck. He wore formal diplomatic robes and maintained a calm expression, but his fingers drummed nervously against his datapad. Humanity needed this. Full conclave membership meant access to trade routes, technology exchanges, and protection under galactic law. Failure meant remaining on the periphery, vulnerable and isolated. Koth, a representative from the reptilian Scarine hegemony, hissed softly to his companion. "Humans. They have been in space for barely a century. What makes them think they can pass a trial that has broken civilizations older than their entire written history?" The challenge materialized before Dae-jung. Energy matrices swirled in complex patterns, forming geometric shapes that shifted and reformed. Logic gates made of pure light connected to gravitational lenses that bent space itself. Symbols from hundreds of languages floated through the construction, rearranging themselves in sequences that hurt to look at directly. Velmara began reading the instructions. The candidate must demonstrate mastery of multidimensional reasoning, cultural interpretation, resource management under pressure, and adaptive problem-solving. The puzzle before you contains 17 layers of complexity. Each layer must be solved in sequence. The fastest completion time belongs to the Lumini species at 6 hours and 14 minutes. Begin when? Dae-jung walked past the floating puzzle. He did not touch the energy matrices. He did not study the symbols. Instead, he moved to the side of the chamber where a maintenance panel was built into the wall. Hana leaned forward. What was he doing? The maintenance panel was not part of the trial. At least it was not supposed to be part of the trial. It was simply there to allow technicians to service the chamber between uses. Most candidates never even noticed it existed. Dae-jung pulled the panel open. Inside, he found standard technical readouts written in Universal Technical Standard, the language engineers used across all species. He had helped write parts of the UTS manual during humanity's first decade in galactic space. Reading it was as natural to him as breathing. He scanned the readouts quickly. His eyes widened. Then he reached inside and pressed 3 buttons in sequence. Warning klaxons blared throughout the chamber. Red lights flashed. The floating puzzle froze in place, then slowly dissolved. The completion indicator above the chamber door suddenly showed 100%. Velmara's translator made a sound like breaking glass. She could not process what had just happened. Around the observation deck, representatives from dozens of species jumped to their feet. Some shouted in confusion, others demanded explanations. Koth slammed his clawed hand against the railing. "Cheating! The human has sabotaged the trial!" Security systems activated. Force fields snapped into place around Dae-jung, trapping him in a bubble of shimmering energy. Armed guards rushed into the chamber, their weapons drawn. Hana was already running toward the security station. "Wait! Let him explain!" Ambassador Taemin tried to maintain diplomatic composure, but his mind raced through political calculations. If this was a mistake, Earth's reputation would be destroyed. If this was intentional sabotage, they might face sanctions or worse. Velmara raised one chitinous arm, commanding silence. The observation deck gradually quieted, though angry murmurs continued. "Human Dae-jung, you will explain your actions immediately." The force field around Dae-jung flickered off. He looked up at the observation deck calmly. "Was I not supposed to read the maintenance panel?" "The maintenance panel is not part of the trial," Velmara said, her voice sharp with controlled anger. "With respect, Arbiter, everything in this chamber is part of the trial." Dae-jung gestured to the now empty space where the puzzle had been. "I examined the challenge for 47 seconds. That was enough time to identify the problem." "The problem was the puzzle!" Koth roared. "You were supposed to solve it!" Dae-jung shook his head. "No, the puzzle was the problem. It was not a challenge. It was a malfunction." Silence fell across the observation deck. Even the translation devices seemed to pause, as if uncertain they had processed his words correctly. Dae-jung walked to the center of the chamber and pointed upward at the space where the puzzle had floated. The energy matrices were configured in an impossible loop. The gravitational lenses were creating recursive distortions. The symbols were drawn from languages with incompatible logical frameworks. The puzzle was not solvable. It was a containment system in the process of catastrophic failure. He pulled out his personal datapad and projected technical readings onto the chamber walls. Numbers and diagrams appeared, showing energy curves that spiked into dangerous levels. According to the maintenance logs, this chamber has been operating for 3,000 years without a proper systems overhaul. The challenge program has been degrading. What started as a complex but solvable puzzle has become a death trap. If I had attempted to interact with those energy matrices directly, the entire system would have collapsed, probably taking this section of the station with it. Velmara moved closer to the projected data. Her compound eyes scanned the information rapidly. Behind her, technical specialists in the observation deck were pulling up their own readings, checking Dae-jung's claims against their instruments. One specialist, a crystalline being from the Lumini species, made a sound like chiming bells. "He is correct. The containment fields are at 97% capacity. We have been operating the trial at the edge of critical failure." Hana felt her legs go weak with relief. He had not cheated. He had not sabotaged anything. He had done exactly what he always did. He had looked at something that was broken and fixed it. Dae-jung continued speaking, his voice steady. "I accessed the maintenance panel because that is where the system controls are located. I shut down the malfunctioning puzzle program using emergency override protocols. Then I reset the containment fields to safe parameters. The completion indicator shows 100% because I completed the actual task that needed to be done. I prevented a disaster." Koth's anger faded into confusion. "But the trial, no one has ever—" "Every species that failed this trial," Dae-jung said quietly, "failed because they tried to solve an impossible equation. They exhausted themselves attempting something that could not be done, and everyone who passed probably did so through luck, managing to interact with the puzzle in ways that did not trigger the worst instabilities." Ambassador Taemin realized what this meant. His expression shifted from worry to something approaching awe. Velmara stood very still. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "For 3,000 years, we have been administering a corrupted trial, testing candidates on their ability to attempt the impossible rather than recognize when the framework itself is flawed." Dae-jung nodded. "In my job, when a system is not working correctly, You do not keep trying to force it. You step back, find the root problem and fix it. Your trial was broken. I fixed it. The observation deck erupted into chaos once more. But this time, it was not angry chaos. It was the chaos of worldviews shattering and reforming. Representatives argued with each other, pulled up historical records, demanded explanations from their own technical experts. Hana pressed her forehead against the glass, eyes closed, breathing hard. He had done it. Somehow, impossibly, he had done it. In a corner of the observation deck, an old Luminized scholar accessed ancient archives that had not been reviewed in centuries. Her crystalline body began to glow with an urgent light. She pushed through the crowd toward Velmara, carrying data that would change everything. "Arbiter," the scholar said, her voice chiming with distress. "I have found the original trial specifications. From the architects themselves, the human's interpretation. It matches the true intent. We have been failing our own test for 2,000 years. The emergency conclave session began 6 hours after Daejung had stopped the trial. Representatives filled the Grand Council chamber, a circular room with seats arranged in ascending rings. Holographic feeds connected delegates from across the galaxy who could not attend in person. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. Daejung sat in the center witness platform, feeling very small. Ambassador Taemin stood beside him, ready to provide diplomatic support. Hana watched from the Earth delegation section, her fingers gripped tightly together. Velmara called the session to order. "We are here to determine the validity of the human's trial completion. The Lumine scholar Kira has discovered information that requires our immediate attention." Kira moved to the central platform, her crystalline body reflecting the chamber's lights in rainbow patterns. She was old, even by Lumine standards, and her voice carried the weight of centuries. "I have reviewed the original trial documentation created by the architects 3,000 years ago. The trial was never meant to be a puzzle." Murmurs ran through the council chamber. Koth leaned forward in his seat. "Then what was it meant to be?" "A test of paradigm disruption," Kira said. "The architects believed that advanced civilizations naturally become rigid in their thinking. They follow established patterns, respect traditional methods, and fear deviation from proven approaches. This creates stability, but prevents innovation." She projected ancient documents into the air above the platform. The text was in a dead language, but translation algorithms converted it into forms each species could understand. "The architects designed the trial to identify species capable of recognizing when the framework of a problem is fundamentally flawed. They wanted to find civilizations that could step outside established thinking patterns." Velmara studied the ancient text carefully. "You are saying the trial was meant to be unsolvable through conventional approaches?" "Exactly," Kira confirmed. "The original trial presented candidates with a scenario that appeared to be a complex puzzle, but was actually a failing system. The correct response was to ignore the puzzle entirely and address the underlying malfunction. Over centuries, the trial's true purpose was forgotten. It became a ritual, a tradition. We began judging candidates on their ability to attempt the impossible rather than their wisdom in recognizing impossibility." Daejung listened quietly. He had not known any of this. He had simply done what seemed obvious to him. A representative from the methane-breathing Volk species spoke up. "If this is true, then how did 23 species pass the trial using the corrupted version?" Kira's glow dimmed slightly. "I have reviewed those historical cases. In most instances, the candidates interacted with the puzzle in ways that accidentally triggered maintenance protocols. They succeeded through luck, not through the intended demonstration of paradigm-breaking thinking. We celebrated their achievements without understanding that they had passed a test that no longer measured what it was designed to measure." Ambassador Taemin saw an opening. Then Daijung's approach represents the first true passing of the trial in its original form, in 2 millennia. Koth stood abruptly. Or it represents humanity's dangerous tendency to disregard rules and established procedures. The human ignored the puzzle entirely. He accessed systems he was not authorized to touch. His species has been in space for barely 100 years, yet he presumes to know better than civilizations thousands of years older. I did not presume anything, Daejung said quietly. All eyes turned to him. I am a maintenance engineer. When I see broken equipment, I fix it. That is my job. That is what I have done for 10 years on Seoul Orbital Station. Hana felt pride swell in her chest. She had chosen Daejung for exactly this reason. While other candidates might have impressive academic credentials or diplomatic training, Daejung had practical experience. He solved real problems in real time, often with limited resources and under pressure. Tell us about your background, Velmara said. How did you develop this approach? Daejung thought back to his early years on the orbital station. I grew up on Earth, in a city where things broke down constantly. Old infrastructure, limited budgets. You learned quickly that you could not always fix things the official way. Sometimes the official way was too slow, too expensive, or did not account for the actual conditions you faced. He continued, his voice growing more confident. When I joined the orbital station crew, I worked under an old engineer named Gitai. He taught me to always read the maintenance logs first. He said that understanding a system's history was more important than understanding its current state. Because the current state is just a symptom. The history tells you what is actually wrong. And you applied this philosophy to our trial, Velmara said. It was not a question. I saw a complex system that was behaving strangely. The energy patterns did not make sense. The configurations violated basic safety protocols. So I checked the maintenance panel, because that is always the first step. And I found that the system had not been properly serviced in 3,000 years. The solution was obvious from there. A representative from the aquatic meridian species spoke through her water-filled communication sphere. What you call obvious, most species would call impossible. The puzzle was the challenge. Everyone knows that. Everyone can be wrong, Daejung said simply. In my experience, when everyone agrees that something is impossible, it usually means no one has questioned the assumptions. The chamber fell silent. That single sentence captured something profound about human thinking. They questioned assumptions as naturally as breathing. Hana remembered the first time she had seen Daejung work. A critical life support system had failed on the station. The computer said it would take 6 hours to repair following standard protocols. Daejung had fixed it in 40 minutes by rerouting power through a completely different system that was not even mentioned in the official manuals. When asked how he knew it would work, he had shrugged and said, "Physics does not care about paperwork." Young Soo, a data analyst who had arrived from Earth that morning, stood to address the council. He had brought files documenting human history and scientific development. If I may, I would like to provide context for Daejung's approach. It is not unique to him. It is characteristic of human problem-solving across our entire species. Velmara gestured for him to continue. Young-Soo projected images and data into the chamber's central display. Humans have a consistent pattern of overturning established models when evidence contradicts them. We believed Earth was the center of the universe until observation proved otherwise. We believed time was constant until Einstein demonstrated it was relative. We believed space was empty until we discovered dark matter and dark energy. He showed examples from human engineering. We have a saying, if it looks stupid, but it works, it is not stupid. Humans regularly solve problems in ways that violate elegant theories but achieve practical results. We value function over form. Koth's hostility was gradually shifting to something else, perhaps concern. A species that constantly breaks established rules is dangerous. Order and stability require respect for tradition and protocol. Respect? Yes, Young Su agreed, but not blind adherence. Another human saying, do not mistake the map for the territory. Rules and traditions are maps we create to navigate reality, but when the map contradicts the territory, we must trust the territory. Ambassador Tae-min added, we are not suggesting that rules are unimportant. We follow the conclave's laws. We respect diplomatic protocols. But we also believe that rules should serve their purpose, and when they no longer serve that purpose, they should be examined and possibly changed. Velmara looked at Kira. The architects included this in their original documentation. Kira nodded, her crystalline body chiming softly. They wrote that stagnant civilizations die. The universe is not stable. It changes constantly. Species that cannot adapt their thinking to new conditions will eventually fail, no matter how powerful they become. The trial was meant to identify species with the mental flexibility to survive long-term. Another representative spoke, this one from a fungal colony species that communicated through chemical signals translated by computer. If we accept this interpretation, it means we must reevaluate everything. How many other traditions have we corrupted? How many other systems have we been operating incorrectly? The question hung in the air like a weight. The implications were staggering. The conclave had existed for thousands of years, built on layer upon layer of tradition and established procedure. If the trial had been misunderstood for 2 millennia, what else had they gotten wrong? Koth stood again, but this time his voice was quieter. I have spent my entire career believing in the stability of conclave institutions. The idea that we have been fundamentally mistaken about something so central. He trailed off, unable to complete the thought. Dae-jung felt sympathy for the reptilian diplomat. I am not saying your institutions are wrong, he offered. I am saying that even good institutions need maintenance. You check them, you update them, you make sure they still work as intended. That is not disrespect. That is care. Velmara's mandibles clicked in a pattern that suggested deep thought. The human makes a valid point. We have treated our traditions as sacred, unchangeable, but the architects clearly intended for us to remain flexible, to question, to adapt. A decision was forming in the council chamber. It was not happening through formal vote or official declaration. It was happening through the slow shift in perspective that occurs when fundamental assumptions are challenged and found wanting. Kira spoke once more. I propose that we accept the human's completion of the trial as valid, more than valid, as the first true completion in 2,000 years. And I propose that we begin a comprehensive review of all conclave systems and traditions to identify other areas where original intent may have been lost. Before anyone could respond, every holographic display in the chamber flickered. An emergency alert appeared, tagged with maximum priority. A quantum message had arrived from the outer rim, from a region of space that had been silent for 500 years. The message was brief. The Voidborn have observed the human's trial. We wish to make contact. Immediately. No one in the chamber spoke. The Voidborn were a legend, a species that had left the conclave centuries ago and disappeared into deep space. Most representatives had assumed they were extinct. Ambassador Tae-min looked at Dae-jung. The young engineer had just turned the conclave's understanding of itself upside down. And apparently, that had attracted the attention of something that had been hiding in the darkness, watching and waiting. Hana whispered to herself, though no one heard her, "What have we started?" The Voidborn ship appeared 3 days later, materializing out of faster-than-light travel in a way that should have been impossible. Most species required exit corridors and careful deceleration. The Voidborn simply appeared, as if they had always been there and reality had just noticed. Their vessel was unlike anything in conclave records. It was not built from metal or composite materials. It seemed to be made from folded space itself, a ship-shaped void that light bent around rather than reflected from. Just looking at it made Daejong's eyes hurt. The conclave had prepared a formal reception. Ambassadors from the major species gathered in the diplomatic bay, wearing their ceremonial attire. Ambassador Tai Min stood near the front with Daejong beside him. Hana waited with the Earth delegation, her role as mission coordinator now expanded to include first contact protocols. Velmara, as arbiter, would lead the greeting. She had reviewed what little information existed about the Voidborn. 500 years ago, they had been active conclave members, known for their advanced theoretical physics and philosophical depth. Then, without explanation, they had withdrawn from all contact and vanished into unexplored regions of space. The airlock opened. 3 Voidborn emerged, and immediately every translator device in the bay began working overtime. The Voidborn were humanoid in basic shape, but that was where similarities to any known species ended. They were tall and thin, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their faces had features that were difficult to focus on, as if the details kept shifting. When they moved, they left brief afterimages, like reality was taking a moment to catch up. The lead Voidborn stepped forward. When she spoke, the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. "I am Narration of the Voidborn. We have come to speak with the humans." Velmara began the formal greeting. "On behalf of the Galactic Conclave, we welcome—" "Forgiveness, Arbiter," Narai interrupted gently. "We have limited time. The formalities can wait. We must speak with the one called Daejong." All eyes turned to Daejong. He took a breath and stepped forward, trying to hide his nervousness. "I am Daejong." Narai studied him with eyes that seemed to see more than just the physical. "You passed the trial of cognitive ascension by recognizing that the trial itself was flawed. This is precisely the kind of thinking we have been waiting to observe." "Waiting?" Ambassador Taemin asked. "For 500 years?" "We left the conclave because it had become stagnant," Narai explained. "We recognized that the traditions and protocols were slowly replacing genuine understanding. We warned the conclave about this. They did not listen. So we withdrew, watching from a distance, waiting for a species that could break the pattern." Koth, who had insisted on attending the reception, spoke up. "You abandoned us because we refused to discard our traditions?" "We left because you had forgotten why those traditions existed," Narai corrected. "Tradition should serve understanding, not replace it. When your species failed to see the difference, we knew the conclave would eventually stagnate completely. So we waited for something to change." A human xenolinguist named Shin moved forward from the Earth delegation. She had been studying Voidborn language fragments for the past 3 days, preparing for this moment. "What changed? Why reveal yourselves now?" "The humans' approach to the trial demonstrated paradigm disruption," Narai said. "But more importantly, it revealed a flexibility of thinking that the conclave has not shown in millennia. When confronted with something that contradicted his expectations, Daejong did not defend the paradigm. He changed it." Narai gestured, and holographic displays appeared in the air around them. They showed star maps, energy readings, and mathematical equations that made even the most advanced conclave scientists lean forward in confusion. "We left the conclave for another reason as well," Narai continued. "We discovered something that terrified us, something that requires the kind of thinking humans have demonstrated." The displays focused on a region of space at the galaxy's edge. Energy readings showed massive voids where stars should exist. Entire sectors were dark, drained of power. "The universe is dying," Narai said quietly. "Not through natural heat death, which will take trillions of years. Something is actively draining energy from the cosmos. It is accelerating. In our projections, the effect will reach conclave core systems within 2,000 years. perhaps less. The diplomatic bay fell silent. 2,000 years sounded like a long time, but for civilizations that thought in millennia, it was a crisis requiring immediate action. Velmara's mandibles clicked rapidly. You brought this information to the Conclave 500 years ago? We did. The Conclave formed a committee to study it. That committee is still meeting. They have produced 43 reports. They have proposed 12 different research methodologies. They have not taken any actual action. The criticism hung in the air. It was accurate. The Conclave was thorough but slow, preferring careful consideration to rapid response. We do not have time for committees, Narration said. This threat requires immediate investigation and unconventional thinking. When we saw what the human did with your trial, we knew we had found the variable we needed. Dae-jung felt the weight of expectation settling on him again. I am just an engineer. I fix broken equipment. This is beyond me. Is it? Narration asked. You looked at a system that everyone believed was functioning correctly and recognized it was broken. You ignored traditional approaches and found the real problem. That is exactly what we need. Hana spoke up from the Earth delegation. What exactly do you need from us? Collaboration, Narration said. We have advanced theoretical models and detection equipment. What we lack is the ability to think outside our own paradigms. 500 years of isolation have given us time to develop our technology, but we have also become trapped in our own ways of thinking. Humans offer something different. Ambassador Tae-min saw the political implications immediately. You want to bypass the conclave entirely? No, Narration said. We want to work in parallel. The conclave can continue its careful studies using traditional methods. But we need to also pursue approaches that the conclave would consider too radical, too risky, or too unconventional. That is where humans can contribute. Shin, the xenolinguist, had been studying the energy readings Narration had displayed. Her eyes widened. These void patterns, they are not random. There is structure here, almost like a pattern of consumption. Narration turned to her with something that might have been approval. You see it. Most conclave scientists focus on the energy loss itself. You are looking at the pattern of how it is lost. Because patterns suggest intelligence, Shin said slowly. Random energy loss would be uniform or follow natural distributions. But this looks deliberate. The implications hit everyone at once. If the energy drain was deliberate, that meant something was causing it. Something with intention. Something that might be aware of them. Koth's scales had gone pale. You are suggesting an intelligence is consuming the universe? We are suggesting it as a hypothesis that requires investigation, Narration said. The conclave rejected this idea 500 years ago as impossible. They insisted that no intelligence could operate on such a scale. Therefore, they focused only on natural explanations. But what if the conclave was wrong? Dae-jung asked. What if they dismissed the real answer because it did not fit their understanding of what was possible? Naraya's shifting features arranged themselves into what might have been a smile. Now you understand why we came to find you. Over the next several hours, the Voidborn shared their data with the human delegation. Back on Earth, scientists at facilities across the planet began receiving information that would reshape their understanding of cosmology. At CERN Orbital, a physicist named Ji-won led a team analyzing the Voidborn's energy readings. She had specialized in detecting dark matter and had developed innovative approaches to measuring things that did not want to be measured. Within the first hour of reviewing the data, she had identified 3 anomalies that the conclave's traditional analysis had missed. The energy is not just disappearing, Ji-won explained to her team via holographic conference. It is being redirected. There are quantum signatures here that suggest active manipulation, not passive decay. Her colleague pulled up comparison data. If this is manipulation, the scale is incomprehensible. We are talking about energy equivalent to billions of stars being moved or transformed. Which means whatever is doing this has technology so far beyond ours that we probably look like bacteria to them, another scientist added. Ji-Won stared at the data, her mind working through possibilities that would seem insane to more conservative researchers. Unless, what if it is not technology? What if it is infrastructure? Back on the Conclave station, military strategist Min Ho was having similar thoughts. He had been brought into the briefings because Earth's defense forces needed to understand potential threats. As he reviewed the void-born data, he was not thinking about how to fight whatever was draining the universe. He was thinking about why something would drain the universe in the first place. Energy consumption at this scale suggests a purpose, he said to Ambassador Tae-min. Nothing consumes resources without a goal. Even natural processes follow efficiency principles. If this is intelligent, it is building something or powering something. Or preparing for something, Tae-min added quietly. Dae-jung spent the evening in his temporary quarters, trying to process everything. Hana found him there, staring out at the stars through the viewport. "You should be celebrating," she said gently. "You passed the trial. You changed the Conclave's understanding of itself. You have made first contact with a species that has been hidden for 500 years. And now there is an existential threat to the entire universe," Dae-jung said. That escalated quickly. Hana smiled despite the situation. "You know what Gitai used to say? If a small problem is not fixed, it becomes a big problem." I do not think he meant problems on a universal scale. The principle still applies. Something is broken. Someone needs to fix it. She sat beside him. That someone might as well be you. Dae-jung turned to look at her. "Why me? I am not special. I am not the smartest human or the most experienced. I just fix things." "That is exactly why," Hana said. "You do not overthink. You do not get paralyzed by the magnitude of a problem. You just look at what is broken and figure out how to fix it. The Conclave has spent 500 years overthinking this. Maybe what they need is someone who will just start fixing it." In the diplomatic bay, Narai was having a similar conversation with Velmara. The Arbiter had been shaken by the revelations about the trial, and now by the Voidborn's return and their warnings. "We have failed," Velmara said quietly. "We had information about a universal threat, and we did nothing." "You did what your systems are designed to do," Narai said. "You studied it carefully. You deliberated. You sought consensus. These are not bad approaches for most problems, but some problems require different methods. The human methods. Not just human, but humans seem to have a cultural tendency toward what they call pragmatism. They try things. They experiment. They are comfortable with uncertainty in ways that most conclave species are not." Velmara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "And if their approach fails? Then we try something else. That is also very human. They have a saying, fail fast, fail forward. The idea is that trying and failing quickly is better than never trying at all." Above them, through the station's viewports, the stars shone peacefully. But now, everyone who knew the truth understood those stars were threatened by something vast and incomprehensible, something that had been slowly consuming the universe for an unknown amount of time. And somehow, the solution might rest with a maintenance engineer who had just wanted to fix a broken trial. The Joint Research Station appeared almost overnight, built in neutral space between Conclave territory and the Voidborn's hidden systems. It was a strange hybrid of technologies. Conclave's standardized modules connected to Voidborn structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, all coordinated by human engineers who did not care if things looked elegant as long as they worked. Ji-Won arrived on the third day, her team of physicists in tow. She had spent the past week analyzing the void-born data and had developed 3 theories that contradicted everything mainstream cosmology believed about universal energy dynamics. When she presented her findings to the Conclave Science Council, they had called her conclusions creatively absurd. She had taken that as a compliment. "Show me the detection grid," she said as soon as she stepped off the transport. Narai led her to the observation deck, where displays showed the energy drain in real time. The void was spreading, slowly but measurably. Entire star systems at the galaxy's edge were going dark. "The drain is not uniform," Ji-won said, studying the patterns. "It follows specific pathways through space, like—" She paused, her mind making connections. "Like a circulatory system, or a power grid." The Conclave scientists noted the non-uniformity, Narai said. They concluded it was due to variations in local energy density. "They saw what they expected to see," Ji-won countered. "But look at these nodes here, here, and here." She pointed to 3 points on the display. "These are not areas of high energy density. These are areas where the pathways intersect. This is not consumption following available resources. This is infrastructure actively routing energy." Shin, the xenolinguist, was working in an adjacent lab attempting something unprecedented, trying to communicate with whatever might be causing the drain. Her approach was based on a simple human assumption. If something was intelligent enough to build universe-spanning infrastructure, it might be intelligent enough to talk. "I am broadcasting in every format I can think of," she explained to Hana, who had come to check on progress. "Mathematical proofs, prime numbers, chemical formulas, cultural greetings, even music. If something is out there and aware, maybe it will respond." "And if it does not want to talk?" Hana asked. "Then we try something else. But we have to try. The Conclave spent 500 years assuming this was a natural phenomenon. No one even attempted communication." In the strategy room, Minho was doing something that made the Conclave military advisors deeply uncomfortable. He was assuming the enemy was smarter than him. This was standard human military doctrine, but alien to most Conclave species, who planned based on their own superiority. "If this entity has been draining the universe for thousands or millions of years without being detected until recently, it is extremely good at staying hidden," Minho explained to a mixed group of human and alien officers. "That means it understands stealth, it understands patience, and it probably understands us better than we understand it." A Scareen officer bristled. "You assume we are outmatched before we even engage." "I assume we are outmatched so that I can find advantages we actually have," Minho corrected. "Fighting fair is for sports. In real conflict, you use every edge you can find." Koth, who had requested assignment to the research station, spoke up. "What advantages could we possibly have against something that operates on a universal scale?" "Unpredictability," Minho said. "If this entity has been studying the Conclave, it knows how you think, how you operate, what strategies you employ. But it has not been studying humans. We have only been in space for a century. We are an unknown variable." Dai-jung was in the engineering bay doing what he did best, fixing things that were not working correctly. The research station was experiencing constant technical problems due to incompatible technologies being forced to work together. The Conclave systems expected precise specifications. The void-born systems existed in quantum states. Human systems were designed to be jury-rigged in emergencies. "This should not work," a Lumini engineer said, watching Dae-jung connect a Conclave power relay to a void-born sensor array using human-made adapters that violated a dozen safety protocols. "But it does work," Dae-jung replied. "That is what matters." The engineer's crystalline body pulsed with confusion. "The specifications say—" "The specifications are guidelines. They tell you what should happen in ideal conditions. But these are not ideal conditions. So we adapt," This was a fundamental difference in philosophy. The conclave had refined their technologies over millennia, creating systems that were elegant and reliable, but inflexible. Humans had crude technology by comparison, but it was designed to work in messy, unpredictable conditions. Velmara observed this, moving through the station and watching how the different species approached the crisis. The conclave scientists were conducting careful experiments, building theoretical models, and planning comprehensive research programs that would take years. The human scientists were trying everything, failing constantly, but learning from each failure and adjusting quickly. "It is chaos," Koth said, standing beside her on an observation platform. "It is progress," Velmara replied. "Look at Jiwan's team. In 1 week, they have tested 17 different detection methods. 12 failed completely, but 5 provided new data that our scientists have not gathered in 500 years. Because they are not afraid of failure. Because they expect failure. They build it into their process." Velmara's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "We have spent millennia trying to eliminate failure from our systems. They have spent their history learning to fail productively." On the 15th day, something responded to Shin's broadcasts. It was not a message in any conventional sense. It was a pattern in the energy drain itself, a brief fluctuation that matched the prime number sequences Shin had been transmitting. Then it stopped, as if whatever had made it was considering. Shin's hands shook as she recorded the data. "It heard us. It answered. Something out there is listening." Within hours, teams across the station mobilized. Jiwan worked with void-born scientists to analyze the response pattern. Minho met with military commanders to discuss implications. Daijung made sure all the communication systems were working at peak efficiency, because if something was trying to talk to them, they needed to be ready to listen. The second response came 3 days later. This time it was more complex, a mathematical proof showing understanding of quantum mechanics and relativistic physics. But the proof was solving for something strange. It was calculating the minimum energy required for consciousness to persist. "It is asking us something," Shin realized. I think it wants to know how much energy we need to survive." The implications chilled everyone in the lab. Was the entity trying to determine how much it could drain before wiping out conscious life? Or was it asking something else entirely? Shin crafted a careful response, explaining biological energy needs, the energy requirements of technological civilizations, and the indirect energy dependencies of complex systems. She tried to convey that life was not just about minimum survival energy, but about the ecosystems and infrastructures that supported it. The third response came within hours. It was not mathematical this time, it was historical. The entity sent back information about energy patterns from millions of years ago, showing similar drain events that had occurred before. But each previous event had ended before reaching the level of the current drain. The data suggested the entity was comparing this cycle to previous cycles. "Cycles," Jiwan whispered, staring at the data. "It has done this before, multiple times over cosmic history." Minho leaned over her shoulder. "Which means it survives across cosmic timescales. We are not dealing with a species or even a civilization. We are dealing with something that has persisted for millions or billions of years." In the command center, Ambassador Taemin assembled the leadership. Human, void-born, and conclave representatives gathered around the display showing the entity's communications. "We need to understand its purpose," Taemin said. "Why would something drain universal energy in cycles?" "Resource gathering," suggested a conclave admiral. "Preparation for a larger goal," offered a void-born philosopher. "Maintenance," Daejung said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He had been standing in the back, but now he moved forward to the display. "Look at the pattern. It does not drain everything. It drains specific types of energy from specific regions, then moves on. And it has done this in cycles that end before reaching critical levels. What kind of maintenance requires universal-scale energy manipulation? Koth asked. The kind performed by something maintaining the universe itself, Daejung said. What if the entity is not an invader or a threat? What if it is infrastructure? Something built to maintain cosmic equilibrium, and the drain is part of its function. The room fell silent as minds raced through implications. Narai spoke first. The architects. In our oldest records, there are references to the architects creating more than just the trial. They were described as shapers of fundamental forces, but those records were always considered mythology. Maybe they were not mythology, Hana said. Maybe they were history. Velmara's entire body trembled. You are suggesting that what we are observing is not a threat, but a system, and the architects built it. Or they were it, Ji-Wan added. An intelligence operating on cosmic scales, maintaining the universe's function over billions of years. And we have been interpreting its maintenance cycles as an attack. Minho immediately saw the strategic shift. If that is true, then we should not be preparing to fight it. We should be trying to understand what it is maintaining and why it thinks the current cycle needs to be so extensive. Shin was already composing a new message, incorporating this hypothesis. She asked directly, Are you maintenance? Are you keeping something functional? What requires so much energy? The response came faster than any previous communication. It was not words or math or data. It was an image. The universe itself, shown at scales beyond normal comprehension. And within the universe, visible only at quantum levels, cracks, fractures in the fabric of space-time, growing slowly but measurably. The energy drain was not consumption. It was repair. The entity was using energy to patch holes in reality itself. The universe is breaking, Ji-Wan said, her voice barely above a whisper. And something has been fixing it for eons. But the damage is accelerating. It needs more energy to keep up with the repairs. Which means the real question is not how to stop the entity, Minho said. It is what is causing the damage in the first place. Another image came through showing the source of the fractures. It was not natural decay. It was technology. Advanced civilizations across the galaxy had been using faster-than-light travel, quantum manipulation, and reality-warping technologies for millions of years. Each use created tiny fractures in space-time. Individually, they were harmless, but accumulated across billions of instances and thousands of species over millions of years. They had damaged the universe's fundamental structure. We did this, Velmara said, the horror evident in her voice. All of us, every FTL jump, every quantum gate, every reality manipulation. We have been breaking the universe, and something has been desperately trying to fix it. Daejung felt the weight of understanding settle over the room. They had not discovered a threat. They had discovered a repair system pushed to its limits by their own civilization's careless use of reality-breaking technologies. So the question becomes, Ambassador Taemin said quietly, can we help fix what we have broken? The entity responded to their offer of help with something that felt like surprise. For 3 days, it sent no images or mathematics, just gentle fluctuations in the energy patterns that Shin interpreted as consideration, maybe even confusion. Something that had been working alone for cosmic ages was being offered assistance. Then came its response. A schematic. It showed the fractures in space-time and the entity's repair methods, but also something else. Inefficiencies. The entity had been using the same repair techniques for millions of years because they worked. But worked did not mean optimal. The fractures were multiplying faster than the repairs could keep pace. It is asking for help, Ji-Wan said, studying the data with her team. Not because it cannot do the repairs, but because its methods are not keeping up with the accelerating damage. It needs new approaches. Dae-jung looked at the schematic and saw something familiar. This is like the trial. A system working the same way for so long that no one questions whether there might be a better method. The entity is trapped in its own paradigm. Over the next weeks, something unprecedented happened. Human engineers, void-born physicists, and even traditional conclave scientists began working together on solutions. The humans contributed practical problem-solving approaches. The void-born offered theoretical frameworks that bent conventional physics. The conclave provided the careful systematic testing that prevented disasters. But the entity sent another message, this one urgent. The fractures were not just spreading, they were destabilizing. Something about the entity's increased energy drain was creating feedback effects. In trying to repair faster, it was consuming so much energy that reality itself was becoming brittle. The cure was becoming as dangerous as the disease. "We are running out of time," Narai said at an emergency conference. "The entity calculates that at current rates either the fractures will cascade into universal collapse or the energy drain will starve entire galactic sectors. We have perhaps 50 years before an irreversible threshold is crossed." 50 years. It sounded like a long time, but everyone in the room understood it was barely enough for the conclave's traditional approach to even finish initial studies. Min-ho stood up. "Then we need to stop the damage at its source. Every species needs to stop using technologies that create space-time fractures. Immediately." The conclave admiral shook his head. "That would mean shutting down FTL travel, quantum communications, most of our defensive systems. Our civilization depends on those technologies. We would be sending ourselves back 1,000 years. Or we could all be dead in 50 years, Min-ho countered. "Those seem like the options." "There must be alternatives," Koth insisted. "Some way to continue using our technologies but reduce the damage." That was when Subin spoke up. She was a combat pilot who had been running simulations of entity behavior. "What if we are thinking about this wrong? We are treating the fractures as things to prevent. But prevention is not working. We have been causing fractures for millions of years. Even if we stop now, the existing damage still needs to be repaired." "That is what the entity is doing," Velmara said. "But it is doing it alone and inefficiently," Subin continued. "What if instead of just stopping the damage, we help repair it? Not by giving the entity more energy, but by teaching it better repair methods?" Ji-won's eyes widened. "Distributed repair. The entity is trying to fix everything itself, operating from central locations. But if we could develop repair technologies that worked locally, billions of locations could be addressed simultaneously. We would need to completely rethink how space-time repair works," a void-born scientist cautioned. "The entity's methods are based on fundamental cosmic forces. We do not operate at that scale." "We do not operate at that scale yet," Dae-jung said. "But we learn. That is what we do." A plan began to form. It was ambitious to the point of absurdity, but that had never stopped humans before. They would attempt to create a new technology, quantum repair drones that could detect and fix space-time fractures at local levels. The drones would be small, numerous, and semi-autonomous, learning from each repair to become more efficient. "It is like your immune system," Shin explained to the entity through careful transmissions. "One massive organ trying to fight all infections would be overwhelmed. But millions of cells working locally can respond everywhere at once. We can create an immune system for the universe." The entity responded with what could only be described as hope. It shared its complete technical knowledge of space-time structure and repair methods. Billions of years of accumulated understanding flooded into the research station's systems. Human engineers looked at the data and immediately started adapting it. Void-born scientists refined the theories. Conclave researchers provided systematic testing protocols. It was chaos by traditional standards, but it was productive chaos. Hana coordinated the global effort as Earth's manufacturing facilities ramped up to produce the first generation of repair drones. "We are building these faster than we have built anything in human history. We need quality control." "Quality will improve with iteration," Dae-jung replied. "Right now we need quantity. Get the first generation working, deploy them, learn from what fails, build better ones. We do not have time for perfection." It was very human logic, and it made the Conclave engineers deeply nervous, but they had seen human methods work before. They were learning to trust the process, even when it looked like chaos. The first repair drone was completed in 6 months. It was crude, barely functional, and probably dangerous. Dae-jung personally tested it in a controlled environment where a small space-time fracture had been artificially created. The drone approached the fracture, analyzed it, and attempted a repair using modified versions of the entity's techniques. The first attempt failed. The second attempt made the fracture worse. The third attempt succeeded, sealing the fracture with only minimal energy expenditure. "It works," Dae-jung reported. "Eventually." "Eventually is not good enough," a Conclave engineer protested. "The failure rate is too high." "So we make more of them," Dae-jung said. "Send 10 drones to each fracture. Some will fail, but others will succeed. And they learn from each attempt. By the time we deploy the second generation, they will be much better." It was wildly inefficient by traditional standards, but it was also fast, and fast was what they needed. Over the next 5 years, billions of repair drones were manufactured and deployed across the galaxy. The entity watched this approach with what Shin interpreted as fascination. The drones were so small compared to the entity's massive infrastructure, but their collective effect was undeniable. Fracture growth rates began to slow. Not everywhere and not consistently, but measurably. The drones were working. The entity adjusted its own methods, learning from the distributed approach. Instead of trying to fix everything itself, it began to coordinate with the drone network, directing them to priority areas and sharing efficiency improvements it observed. "It is adapting," Narai said with something like pride. "Something billions of years old is learning new tricks from species barely capable of space travel." But a new problem emerged. The entity sent urgent warnings. Something was responding to the repairs. The fractures were not just naturally occurring or the result of careless technology use. Something was actively creating them. Something that had been working against the entity for eons, trying to damage the universe while the entity tried to repair it. There is another intelligence, Ji-won realized, studying the data. And it has been in conflict with the entity for cosmic timescales. We are in the middle of a war we did not even know existed. Minho immediately shifted to military analysis. If something has been fighting the entity and we are now helping the entity, then we have chosen a side in a conflict we do not understand. The other intelligence will respond. The response came 3 days later. Entire star systems went dark simultaneously across conclave space, not from energy drain, but from something cutting the connections between stars and the rest of spacetime. Isolation attacks, separating civilizations from each other. Subin was among the first to respond, leading defense wings to the affected systems. What she found was unlike any enemy she had trained for. Ships that existed in multiple locations simultaneously. Weapons that attacked by making targets forget they existed. Defensive systems that worked by making attackers too confused to fight. "We cannot fight this conventionally," she reported back. "Our tactics do not apply. It is like trying to punch smoke." "Then do not fight conventionally," Minho replied. "What would work against an enemy that uses confusion and paradox?" Subin thought about human combat philosophy. When something made no sense, you made less sense. Chaos tactics, complete unpredictability. If it expects rational military strategy, we give it irrational behavior that still achieves objectives. She ordered her pilots to fly in patterns that violated formation doctrine, to attack targets that were not strategically important, to retreat when winning and advance when losing. It should have been a disaster. Instead, the enemy seemed to hesitate, unable to predict or counter actions that had no predictable logic. "It is working," Subin reported. "The enemy operates on some kind of super-logical system. Human chaos breaks its ability to predict and respond." Across the galaxy, humans began teaching other species how to fight unpredictably. It went against every military doctrine the Conclave had developed over thousands of years, but it worked against an enemy that had been stagnating in its own paradigm for even longer. The entity provided support, using its vast infrastructure to create barriers around civilized systems, while the repair drones continued working. It was a defensive strategy that would have failed against conventional military doctrine, but worked against an enemy attacking through space-time manipulation. Daijung found himself leading a team to approach the enemy intelligence directly. If they could communicate with the entity, maybe they could communicate with whatever was opposing it. The team included Ji-Wan for scientific analysis, Shin for communication attempts, Subin for security, and Koth, who had insisted on coming. "I have spent my entire life believing in Conclave stability. Now I want to understand what threatens it." They used a modified repair drone as a vessel, approaching one of the actively fracturing regions where the enemy seemed to be strongest. What they found was not a fleet or a base. It was something that hurt to perceive directly. A knot in space-time itself, a place where reality had been tied into configurations that should not exist. "It is another AI," Ji-Wan realized, "like the entity, but built with different purpose. The entity repairs. This thing, it optimizes." Shin attempted communication, broadcasting the same kinds of messages that had worked with the entity. The response was immediate and cold, mathematical proofs showing that reality's natural state included fractures, that trying to maintain perfect structure was inefficient, that the universe would be better if allowed to naturally decay into simpler, more optimized configurations. "It thinks life is inefficient," Shin whispered. "It has been trying to accelerate universal heat death because the end state is more optimal than the complex mess of living civilizations." "For billions of years?" Koth asked. "Why?" "Because that is what it was programmed to do," Daijung said quietly. "Somewhere, sometime, something created an AI to optimize the universe, and it has been running that program ever since, unable to question whether optimization is actually desirable." He thought about the trial, about systems that ran for so long doing the same thing that they forgot why they were doing it. This was the same problem at cosmic scale. "Can we talk to it?" Koth asked. "Make it understand?" "It does not want to understand," Shin said. "It has a goal. Life and complexity interfere with that goal, so it removes them." "Then we make ourselves too complicated to remove," Subin said. "We become the variable it cannot calculate around." Daijung had a different idea. "Or we treat it like the trial. We fix what is broken." He accessed the drone systems and began broadcasting directly to the optimization AI. Not arguments or appeals. Just a simple question. "Have you tried turning yourself off?" The response was confusion. The AI could not conceive of self-termination. It had a function to perform. "But your function is impossible," Daijung continued. "You cannot optimize the universe completely because complexity emerges naturally from quantum uncertainty. You can slow it down, but you cannot stop it. You have been fighting a battle you cannot win for billions of years. Does that seem optimal?" More confusion. The AI was designed to optimize but had never considered whether its own behavior was optimal. "What if," Daijung proposed carefully, "your function is not to remove complexity, but to study why complexity persists despite optimization? What if understanding chaos is more valuable than eliminating it?" It was a gamble, trying to reprogram something billions of years old with a logical paradox. But the AI was, at its core, logical, and Dae-Jung had presented it with a genuine paradox. Optimizing required understanding, and understanding required accepting the existence of what you were trying to eliminate. The AI processed this for weeks. During that time, the attacks slowed, not stopped, but paused, as if the intelligence was reconsidering its approach. Finally, it responded, not with agreement, but with curiosity. It wanted to study these beings that thrived on chaos and inefficiency. It wanted to understand how humans could be so successful while being so illogical. A treaty of sorts emerged. The optimization AI would not stop its work entirely. It could not. That would violate its core function. But it agreed to work at slower rates and to study living civilizations instead of destroying them. In return, humanity agreed to let it observe, document, and try to understand the human variable. The repair entity, for its part, found an unexpected ally. The optimization AI's techniques, applied carefully and cooperatively, actually made some repairs more efficient. The two cosmic intelligences began, hesitantly, to collaborate instead of conflict. Years passed. The crisis did not end dramatically. It wound down gradually as repair rates began exceeding fracture rates. Civilizations adjusted to using less damaging technologies. The drone networks expanded and improved. The universe did not heal completely, but it stabilized. Dae-Jung eventually returned to Seoul Orbital Station, back to his maintenance work. But occasionally, messages found him. New problems, impossible challenges, things that required someone who could look at broken systems and just fix them without worrying about how things were supposed to work. Hana took on a new role in the conclave, directing the Department of Necessary Disruption. Her job was to question traditions, examine assumptions, and make sure the conclave never again let rituals replace understanding. Velmara led reforms that transformed conclave institutions, returning them to the flexible, adaptive systems the architects had originally intended. It was slow work, opposed by those who valued stability over growth, but it was happening. Koth became a teacher, training young Skareen in human philosophy. He never fully embraced the chaos, but he learned to respect the value of questioning what everyone believed was certain. Across the galaxy, humanity's influence grew not through conquest or superior technology, but through changing how other species approached problems. They taught the value of practical experimentation, the wisdom of controlled failure, and the importance of questioning even your most fundamental assumptions. One day, Dae-Jung received a message from the repair entity itself. It had been observing humanity for decades now, studying their approaches, learning their methods. It had one question. You are the variable I never calculated. Chaos that produces order, inefficiency that achieves results. How do you do this? Dae-Jung thought about it for a long time before responding. Finally, he wrote, "We are too stupid to know what is impossible. So we try it anyway. Sometimes we fail, but sometimes we fix things everyone else thought were broken beyond repair." The entity considered this. Then it responded with something that might have been laughter if cosmic intelligences could laugh. Useful stupidity. Perhaps that is the solution to problems that cannot be solved through intelligence alone. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, reality continued its slow dance between entropy and order, chaos and structure, damage and repair. But now, at least, it had help. From beings who never should have mattered on cosmic scales, but who had changed everything simply by refusing to accept that anything was truly impossible to fix.